Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining in and participating in our conversation on strategic planning. I'm going to do some introductions of some folks that are involved on the screen here in a second. But I first wanted to mention why we're doing a small group session. I think it's helpful to kind of understand that some things lend itself to large groups and some to smaller groups. And this is one that we think lends itself to smaller groups for reasons that will become more clear as we kind of march along. But mostly because unlike master planning, which is a lot of visual, you see it and you like it, you have a visceral reaction, something that feels good or something that doesn't feel good. And that's mostly about the what, you look at the what, you see it. Strategic planning has a little bit of what in it, and it's a very important what, but the bigger part of the picture here is the why and the compelling why. And that is more of a conversation and a discussion to kind of get that clear in one's head as we march through things. That lends itself a little better to a smaller group as well. So that's why we're doing it. We've got participation here from some folks that are in the background who are listening, who will help in the communication process as we march through the various meetings this week and into subsequent weeks. And we also have a couple of our board members, Mike Meekum, who is our incoming president of the board, who will be taking Ann Brand's place and being our outgoing board president for the trustees. Jim Fitzgerald, who has been a past president and is a domain expert that will come in parts of this conversation. And I believe Alex Tibbetts may be on this call. I can't see right yet, but Alex Tibbetts is another board member who you may not have met before, but who is someone who is becoming increasingly involved in Horizon House and is serving as our vice president of the Board of Trustees and will be working closely with Mike. Jim or Ian, have I left anybody out who should be specifically called out and introduced? Okay. All right. Well, let's kind of cut to the chase here and kind of get in. And
I'm Eli Lemansky.
Oh, sorry, Eli. I assume everybody knows Eli. Eli's like the old shoe. You just you see him all the time. But Eli is a part of this process too that it will become more clear as we kind of march through things. Okay. So, technical support is on its way. Oh, should I just use that one instead?
I'll just make sure it's on the, wait, it should be, yeah, arrows.
Okay. All right. So this is really titled Horizon House, a Strategy for Continued Success. Part of the responsibility of the Board of Trustees, if not their primary responsibility, as well as administration, is always looking to the future to figure out what is it that we should be doing to ensure that Horizon House continues to be the success that it has been in the past. These things don't happen on their own. They're actually very intentional, and they happen throughout our lifetime, not just every week, but that there are certain key points where changes and new things are introduced that make for the success of Horizon House. And the couple of things I want to take a look at is what has gotten us to Horizon House so far. How have we gotten to where we are? Now, this has been a very discerning history that we've had over 60 plus years. And one of the key things is that we nurture a very distinct culture, that resident engagement. And it's always been going on, but it is something that we are now even more present with, and we codify and we talk about it in every way because it's a very distinguishing factor to why we are different than other communities. And I don't mean that in a hubris kind of way, but in a reality. And you all know that. And that is one of the elements that has made our success and something very important for us to continue. Commitment to community, paying it forward. Every generation of Horizon House has benefited from the decisions of a previous generation and also participates in paying it forward for a future generation that they may or may not participate in as much, depending on your age and when you arrived here. That is a kind of a core attribute of Horizon House. Continual campus renewal. We're in master planning, and normally you would not have master planning and strategic planning all happening at the same time. That's an awful lot of stuff. But because master planning hadn't gotten the attention it needed to perhaps a little bit earlier, these things have kind of collided where we're addressing these things now somewhat concurrently, or at least in very close succession. And as you know, whether it's Fireside Lounge or what you've seen in the other things from Bethune, the idea of improvement is essential to being attractive to both the people who are here today, as well as the people who want to come in the future. Another one is strategic growth at key intervals. We have a very documented history of strategic growth. And I'm going to walk you through a timeline of the kinds of growth we've had so you can kind of witness how we have grown over time, which has enabled our success. And I bold that because the strategic plan is largely about that growth pattern and the need for continual growth to be successful. And then the last item, I think this is the last item, is financial management. We are a caring community, and we are also a financial community. When I first arrived here, I think that it wasn't quite as clear that they are not mutually exclusive. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. You don't have to be a caring organization and a financially sound one. You can be both. And we try to pay attention to both. So let's talk a little bit about what is strategic growth. Well, it is targeted expansion to do primarily one of three things. One is to simply fulfill mission. Optimizing your services, senior served inside or outside of residence. And for the most part, we are fulfilling mission. That's not a big stretch for us. We are doing pretty much what we have said we want to be doing. Second is to expand mission. And many of you may be familiar with other communities, either in the neighborhood and other parts of the country, where they are stepping out to do different things, whether it's offering low-income housing. At one point, we did home care. It's maybe senior centers. It might be different types of communities that an organization may, depending on its mission and vision, say, we need to step out to expand and to do more. That has not necessarily been our hallmark. Our hallmark has been more about understanding who we are and extending who we are rather than going too far off the curve. It's just simply not a part of our DNA. Doesn't mean that it can't be, but it hasn't been our primary focus. But ours is about sustaining mission. And that's basically sustaining mission right here where we are, where we live and work today. And it means growing that resident base. Could be outside of Horizon House, but in our case, it's going to be in Horizon House to sustain our mission. And our mission being that to serve residents in a resident-driven community and to continue to attract people at a very broad socioeconomic group. We don't just want people here, not just people here. We are probably the most economically diverse community, pretty close to in the country, certainly on the West Coast, and that is something we take great pride in. So, the growth recommendation we're sharing today is a product of strategic planning. We didn't just arrive at some notion to just grow in a certain way in a vacuum. We actually went through a very discerning process. So the first thing is to kind of understand, what is strategic planning? And for those of you who've been in businesses and organizations in the past, there's always a slightly different definition of what that might look like. For us, it's about examining our operation in the context of our marketplace and in the context of our mission and vision, meaning that we look at how we operate, not just looking inside ourselves exclusively. Are we doing food service right? Are we doing the gym right or whatever? We're looking at our ability to operate in our environment with the competitive alternatives that exist, whether that's an Aegis or it's a Skyline or Hearthstone or Mirabelle or whatever. But it's also important that we look at it in the context of who we say we are. So that yes, we care about what's going on competitively, but we also care about looking at it in the context of what do we care about ourselves? What is our mission and our vision? So again, it is about sustaining mission is what we're most focused on now. Our growth initiatives out of our strategic planning process is not to necessarily fulfill mission, not necessarily to expand our mission, but it is to sustain the mission that we have today that you all benefit from today. So we spent a little bit of time looking at our mission and vision, which were a little bit, convoluted, and they may serve the purpose at the time. And now we would need a little bit of a revision so that we could get crystal clear. We'll be sharing that mission and vision a little bit more detail in the coming weeks with some of our branding logos and so on we are also evolving. But let's take a look at what we have said so far. We've really shortened our mission to say it is purposeful living in a resident-driven community. Those are the kind of the essence of what we're about. That's what we're trying to achieve, and hopefully something you feel we are achieving. And our new vision statement is about using the power of a resident-driven community to enhance well-being. That we believe that by having residents involved and engaged, not unlike what we're doing right here, right now, that inclusion and your likes and dislikes, preferences, changes or whatever it is, are things that we talk about and we discuss. You have 60 plus committees that are focused on all sorts of different diverse interests, because we all believe that is what gives us better well-being. We all live better and do better when we have the opportunity to plug in. And that's not something that exists in other communities, and I don't mean that pejoratively, it's just not their agenda. Their agenda is, create the wonderful and more of a hospitality-oriented environment, and that's great. That's not what gives our people that well-being. And hopefully that's something you would all say, yeah, that's kind of why I'm here. So our strategic planning process was not something that was trivial. We started actually in January 2020 but then COVID hit, right? So then we got backdoor to having to start in June of that year, and we spent a subgroup of the board met 12 to 15 times throughout the next 7 months to really understand what we meant by strategic planning. What was this project we were undergoing? And excuse me, we had this led by a really top-notch facilitator, Ryan Frederick. I met him, I think, the first week I was at Horizon House, upwards of 9 years ago, at a convention of leading age back east. And I said, this guy is one bright guy who I hope we have the privilege of working with. And I think that it was one of the best processes of strategic planning I've ever been involved in. And Ryan simplified a very complex process to help us arrive at what we're talking about today. So the model of strategic planning was quite simple from Ryan's perspective. It was, assess where we are. What is our current situation? How do we look at our situation? And where might we want to go? Where might we have to go? And then also, how do we get there? What's going to be our way to get there? So our conclusion was that we really needed to have growth as an essential part of our sustainability. And that growth was going to lead to something that, as it has in the past, that secures many of the things that we value and feel are important here. And that's what we're going to kind of progress into here. So we looked at our financial situation, or looked at our operations in the context of our finances, and as you all know, you hopefully read the reports or you pick up on them periodically, you know that we're really very financially strong today. Among the strongest, we have a high credit rating, we have cash in the bank, we've got operating margin, which is the equivalent of the income you had when you were living in your house and you were working and you wanted a mortgage and you could afford a mortgage because you have the income to support it. We are in that good situation. But what was illuminated in the process was that if we were to just not do anything and continue to march forward, that over a 10-year period of time, we would have significant degradation in our financial perspective, our financial position. We also would have a more difficult time, and this is really key, attracting the people who add to the vitality of the organization. It's important that not only do we continue to bring people into the community who are just age appropriate. Somebody to invite in. It is important that people come in who want to participate in leaders of those 60 committees or be members of the board or in a part of residence council. And we find there are certain ways in which that those people are attracted to an organization. I've had a number of conversations recently where people are saying we're having the hardest time finding people to take leadership roles in various committees. It's just like too much. They're kind of too tired. They're burned out. Same few people keep doing the same thing. We need to regenerate that, and that's a part of what this process is about. There are a lot of challenges coming in the next 10 years, and we are in the thick of it right now. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Staffing challenges are tough. It's not going to get alleviated anytime soon. Leadership is a continual issue within communities. A number of retirements occur in our industry, and not a lot of people in the second and third seats who can step up to those jobs. That is a challenge. Capital spending, whether it is our regular capital spending for doing the things that we do every single day, day in and day out to fix things and improve things. It's also about our master plan and being able to do the large things that you've been hearing us talk about. That's very expensive. And our cost structure. This is somewhat unique to us in that when you have a broad socioeconomic group and you have people at a more moderate level of income and people at a higher level of income, not everybody can sustain the increases in fees equally. And we have tried very hard to have our fee increases year over year to be as reasonable as possible so we do not upset that mix of balance of people, because we know how it adds to the quality of our community. I have a colleague at another community in town who raised their fees 6.5%. And that they said they will raise it again, most likely in the spring or summer. And this is to get a 0% margin. This is to stay barely even. If they didn't raise it that much, they wouldn't be able to make it. That is not our situation, and we don't want it to be our situation. And we don't want to outprice the people who we really dearly want here in order to get the margin that is necessary to continue to build the capital and the operating earnings to get the mortgage that pays for the master planning that begins the cycle over and over again. I hope that makes sense. We can always talk in more detail another time. So what we've determined is that doing nothing is not an option. I mean, and most organizations, especially in our industry, wait until there is a gun at the head that makes the decision easy, but makes the problem to solve really hard. And we are by nature, and I think by administration, proactive. We want to get out in front of things. We want to solve the problem before it becomes one of very limited choices. And that is also why you do the strategic plan. So you get ahead of the curve on the decisions you need to make to ensure a future that you all want. But it's more elective, right? It's easier to do it when there is no choice. It's harder to do it when there are choices and to understand what the impact will be and feeling the need to take action sooner than later. So there were some key imperatives to this. This is all building towards a series of things that we will get to the what, but the why is critical that everyone understands. There are some key imperatives that we wanted to make sure that whatever our strategic choices would be, they would not violate, one, to preserve and protect the community and that resident-driven culture. We couldn't make decisions that would in any way compromise that thing, which is our distinguishing and differentiating attribute. The second key imperative was to perpetuate and grow that resident-driven culture if the pursuit of it does not negatively affect number one. That, it's kind of a little bit, they're tied together. We have, and that's a little bit tighter needle to thread in the choices that you make, because you could make choices that could ultimately solve the problem of financial sustainability over 10 years. But what if it changed the culture dramatically and all of a sudden the organization was not what you wanted it, and what you came from? We don't want to be in that position. So we had to have these two things in mind. So growth for us is a sustainability strategy. Again, it's not about expanding the mission or filling the mission. It is sustaining the very thing that we come to appreciate and we want to ensure lasts indefinitely. So the financial picture, so let's just kind of put some numbers to it. These are high level examples of what it looks like if you do nothing. So Christy and I spent time trying to figure out, well, if we project out what we believe to be a cost structure and the uses of cash to do the things we want in the building, what happens to our days cash on hand? And days cash on hand is a metric in our industry that we use to say, how many days could you survive if everything, all the inflows of cash stopped? So you can see right now we're over 1,000 days. That's basically over 3 years of cash that we have in the bank that we can use to solve problems. But as time marches on, you see it gets down to barely a year, and that might be optimistic. So this is what we see in terms of a trend line that we want to reverse and make sure this doesn't become the gun at the head that forces a decision we don't want to make. Another metric is the operating margin or the operating profit. Yes, we're a nonprofit, and yes, we make a profit, and we're good with that. Why? Because if you get a mortgage, you have to show you have the income to support it. And just as you did with your working years, you wanted to have a new addition to your house or buy a new house, they went right to your income and said, well, you can afford it or you can't afford it. They do the same thing for us. And I watch other communities struggle with needed improvements and the inability to pay the mortgage necessary to make those improvements. Then what happens? You go into decline. And it's very hard to reverse the decline in big shifts like Horizon X. So you want to stay on top of it so you're never in a position where you are trying to catch up over years and years of neglect. So these are the things that concern us and what caused us to say that growth is a sustainability requirement. Okay, so some of our goals, a little bit of a repeat, is to maintain our broad socioeconomic resident base through continued prosperity and modest fee increases. So again, repeating myself, so we can have the people here who we want to have here and that everyone will feel comfortable. We want to ensure that we have resources available for continued improvements and for both the cash available and the borrowing capacity so that we can solve the problems that we see are necessary to be solved. We want to ensure that resources available to attain and retain staff and the leadership in a very labor-constrained market. There was a time when you could say, well, so-and-so, you're working for a nonprofit, you don't really, you just have to, you have to give up the income. Well, how can people live in Seattle and live off of wages that aren't fair and reasonable? It's pretty hard, whether it's at the staff level or at the leadership level. And we compete in our marketplace against technology companies who have great people, and we can't necessarily meet their level of requirements. But we do find that we now have to pay a different market level to attain and retain people than we might have back in the days when the cost of living in our town wasn't that great. It's a different game now. The other is to appeal to future residents that have the vitality to carry on that resident-driven culture. Excuse me. We know that when people join us, and here's what we've been noticing, is that people who come into Horizon House recently are not necessarily older, so the age hasn't changed. There's been a difference in that we have found that people who have joined more recently might come in with more conditions that cause them not to be able to step up to those leadership positions and or committee work that is the essence of who we are. So we need to make sure we have a way in which we can attract those people so that vitality is a continual flow into the community. Okay. So we talked about growth as a sustainability strategy. Well, what were some growth options? What did we play with? What did we look at that we thought needed to have a little bit more analysis to decide, where to go? Well, one was to build a site nearby. You take a look, and Jim Fitzgerald sitting to my right here, he can speak volumes about, for 10 years, probably longer, we've been looking in the neighborhood to Virginia Mason or Kindred or wherever else nearby, where we could build another location to attract people of similar ilk that gives us the economic heft that growth gives you when you expand. We have not been able to get that real estate. We actually, Jim and I and Eli, made a run at the Terry-Ann Apartments, thinking maybe the Terry-Ann Apartments could serve. And when we on paper, we wanted to do this deal. We wanted to make it happen. We snapped into action. And then we went over there and we looked at this thing and we figured out the investment required versus the benefit we would get. And it was appalling. It wasn't doable. It would be like a bad deal. So we walked from it because not all deals are created equal. And so if we wait for the right piece of property to come around, it's like waiting for Godot on the park bench. You may be there rewriting with Beckett into the future. What's the new story? I'm sitting on the park bench. So partnering with others, okay? Join forces, find other people. This is a very common strategy used in our industry, especially now, when organizations begin to suffer financial insecurity. They then look for other partners who can help stem that outflow. And there's a lot of good behind it, so I don't want to totally diss it. But there is also a trade-off that you accept when you have a partner. And that is, you're probably partnering with somebody who's bigger and stronger. They have a point of view, they have a culture, and who do you think is going to carry the day in that experience? Well, it's not to say that it can't work, because all communities are at the local level, but there are still many things that get driven from another level that may not be entirely desirable. And I wouldn't say that that is entirely a bad thing. It's not a first choice kind of thing. All right, expand to other areas away from downtown. So again, if expansion is more residents, because more resident gives you more revenue, gives you more leverage, helps secure your financial position, does that answer the vitality issue? If the vitality issue is right here, does the vitality issue get answered better if you're in Burien or Des Moines? Maybe not. Does it answer the issue about maybe expertise in your ability to be suburban when you're really an urban community? Emerald Communities built, they're suburban, and they built in Gig Harbor, a long ways away, but it was kind of the same model. Well, we know urban. We don't know suburban. We are, a vertical tower. We're not horizontal. Just the physical structure. So we don't have a degree of confidence necessarily that would say, well, we have business going there, nor do we think that it necessarily addresses the key issues. So entering different business lines. Oh, well, why don't you just have a profitable business line that makes up whatever concerns you have on days cash on hand or margin and call it a day? Well, what businesses do we know? We don't can fruit, we don't log timber, we don't fish, we don't make stuff. We serve seniors. Okay, well, what are the businesses that can serve seniors that give you those benefits? Well, we tried home care, and I was responsible for running it, and I was responsible for trying to make it grow. And then I realized that dog don't hunt. That isn't a there. There isn't a margin. Why? Because it's very labor intensive. It's very difficult. And now you look at our staffing challenge. To be in the business of home care is like a big problem with no change on the revenue side. So that's not easy, to be in another business. Plus, we don't necessarily have the expertise to be in another business. So growing and relying more on the endowment. When I got here at the end of, or the beginning of 2013, we ended 2012 with an endowment of around $7 million. Our endowment, through the wonderful contributions of residents coupled with earnings, is now $28 million. That is serious money. Well, We have purposes for that, primarily to support residents who run out of money, and we want to continue to do it. That is a hallmark of who we are. Could we rely on the endowment or continue to grow it more and more to address the issues of declining cash and or operating earnings? Well, it would put more pressure on a subset of people at Horizon House, and we would be asking more of them than might be fair. And we thought, I don't think, maybe the endowment will play a role in helping, but to rely exclusively on growing an endowment and making it bigger to solve those financial issues isn't really going to, probably be something everyone can participate at a greater rate than they've already done, which has been wonderful. The other thing is, does that address vitality? Kind of doesn't. Okay, so now we come down to building on our own site. Something we control, something that we are familiar with as a possibility. Okay, so before we get into that detail, let's talk a little bit about what our growth history has been to remind everyone how much is in our DNA. So when we look at the timeline back to the 1950s, when Horizon House was just a glimmer in the eyes of UCC sponsors, we started off with a small operation in 1956 with the Baldwin Apartments. And you can see that we added units in 63, in 73, in 83, 85, 96, we bought the Leroy Apartments that became the place where the North Tower was built. And then we are in master planning now to redo certain things. The North Tower addition back in the day is the reason we can be in this room today and have a really positive conversation. It brought two things. It brought the financial leverage. And what I mean by financial leverage is you have new people joining the organization, in this case, 100 residents in the North Tower, without a commensurate increase in cost. So you get more revenue, not as much cost associated to service that revenue. You widen your margin serves you out into time until it doesn't. The other thing it brought was vitality. It was brand new. It represented the future. It became appealing to the people of a current generation who saw themselves in that building. And while there was, to what I heard from Ann and others, it was controversial because the fear was, well, if you add more people in here, won't you change this culture? Won't you take this good thing? And there was that risk. But for various reasons, whether it's luck or strategy or whatever, the addition of people in from the North Tower added to that vitality and strengthened the resident-driven community aspect of who we are, didn't weaken it. And we believe that's essential to continue growth, is to have that more vitality. So what does growth look like and how will this affect residents? Well, I always like this one from Mark Twain. I'm in favor of progress. It's change I don't like, and I'll add on the other thing. I'm all for change so long as nothing is different, right? And we're all that way. We're all that way. And this is where I believe that and part of the reason why you and other people in the early part of this week are in this room is, and I want to be very sensitive to the fact that the changes are going to affect you more so than other people. And that is it's a challenge, it's a pay it forward, it's about us, and yet it's going to be somewhat gut-wrenching to all of you in the context of something exciting and very necessary for Horizon House. So we're going to have you take a look here at our current footprint, and you can see that we've got a North Tower that I guess is 15 years. I didn't think we were quite that old yet. And then we have the East Tower, Central Tower combo, which is 39 years old. No, that's not right. Oh, East Tower is 39. Central Tower is the original 66 years old. Thank you for doing that. And then the West Wing, 37. So the ideal is you'd say, well, you go to the one that is the oldest. Wouldn't that make most sense? And you've heard us talk in various sessions about trying to improve, whether it's air conditioning or windows or footprints or whatever in the Central Tower. Why? Well, how about starting there? Well, There's a reason why we're not going to start at the central tower, and part of it is because how integrated it is every single thing else on the campus, and the large number of people that would need to be relocated to try to rebuild that. But let there be no mistake, the central tower is the next thing to be addressed. East Tower next to be addressed in 15 years, 20 years, whatever the number is. But the one that we want to tackle now is a proposed West Tower. And this would be replacing the current West wing with a new tower that would be the kind of the hallmark, in the same way that the North Tower was the hallmark back in 2008. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk a little bit more about, what we mean here and timelines and whatever, but I want everyone to kind of catch their breath. Has everyone kind of followed along so far on the why and the reasoning behind getting us to this place? We'll have lots of time, in fact, not months, but years to talk through. So it's not like this is your last chance. But I want to kind of turn to Jim a little bit here. Jim has been, a developer in his past life and has been instrumental in helping us to understand our growth opportunities and ways we can grow. And Jim, you chime in here?
Well, when I joined the board at the beginning of 2011, Bob Henderson said to me, because you've been in the real estate development business, that's really, I'd like you to figure out where we're going to grow. And the obvious place was the parking lot across the street, across here, which is owned by Virginia Mason. And he and I met with president or the CEO of Virginia Mason. We had a board member, Sarah Patterson, that was the COO of Virginia Mason. So we thought we would have a chance to get that. We worked on that for as long as Bob was here, which was for 3-4 years, I guess. And then Sarah came. Sarah and I worked on it. But the Virginia Mason is a big organization, can't really make decisions very easily. And of course, now they've been partnered with or taken over by this other organization. So it's getting even muddier now. Anyway, we were not able to get that property. We talked to Kindred. They don't want to get out of that business. And their building is assessed by King County at $21 million. And it's not a building that would work for us, so we have to acquire it for 21 or more, probably more, tear it down and build something there. So and the Virginia Mason property, they were first talking about 7 million. It's probably up to 10 or 12 by this time. So that's big money to start with. I happen to live in the North Tower on the northwest corner of High. I just was looking out of my window one day and I looked way down at the west wing. I said, there's a piece of property that we own. We already own it. It's very underutilized for in its current state. So that's where I kind of got this idea. I brought it to the board and Mike, and they all kind of, and they went away and continued with their strategic planning. And then one day Mike said to me, we kind of like your idea now. So we hired Methuen to take a look at it. Can we do it? Is it possible? I had this crazy idea that we would build a platform on top of it, keep the west wing ways, build a platform on top and go up. That's been done in some places. And Methuen looked at it and said, yeah, technically we could do that. It'd be very, very tough to do. Especially, and we would not be able to be residents in there while that was being built, of course. Well, that made no sense because to try and do that with a platform. It would be kind of a funny building. So that made us think that it makes more sense to start from scratch, have the right building, do it all, and integrate it with the rest of the campus. We looked at, or Bethune came up with about 5 or 6 different designs. Some of them had angles, like the angles one. I said, you don't want angles, that's not very efficient for apartments. And like,
It's hard to have a bedroom that's a triangle.
yeah. So at least I think I talked to the one that works out well. And so this is what we have. And I think it's an exciting project. And I think it's going to affect all of you, of course. But I think in the long run, as Mike has pointed out, if we don't do something like this, Horizon House is not sustainable. We want to keep it going. We have to look towards the future.
Thanks, Jim. And I'm going to have some thoughts and comments from some of our other board members too. Yes. The idea of okay, great, thanks. So this is just another kind of rendition of what that West Tower would look like. We're in an enviable spot in that we do not have the issue of a building that can be put up in front of us like Skyline does with their new tower, where their views could be taken, or worse yet, take a look at Mirabella. Talking about starting off with fabulous views in all directions, and now they have none. So this is unique in our placement with vis-a-vis the Freeway Park. We would include lots of redoing of decks to create as much outdoor space as possible. This does not consume, it actually provides more outdoor space in ways we can deliver on that. So just, some of the quick off the top benefits is that this is the kind of, when you own the property, and you're able to put up a tower. We'll talk about some of the details of how many residents, units, and so on. But it does offer a lot of both the financial leverage, where you have more revenue without the expenses, because you don't have to add more swimming pools. You do have to add more amenities to accommodate the increase in people, but not proportionally. And you, as the North Tower did, we want to believe and hope this to be true, that we attract a increasingly vital group of people to be the ones who are the caretakers of our resident-driven model. We increase amenity gathering spaces. So the idea is there is more meeting spaces, rooftop dining, improved outdoor terraces, resident gardens, and additional parking. And again, we're not trying to do something that is about being flashy. We're trying to do things that are substantially of value to the residents who are here. So the design of the building, inside and outside, are intended not to be like a skyline, but to be more of an iteration of who we are. And it meets the needs of the people who live here and the people who want to keep coming here. Attractive state of the art. One of our challenges has been in the West Wing, it's certainly true in the Central and East, is that we do not have the capability to bring lots of the improvements at affordable prices. I mean, it is impossible to add air conditioning into the Central Tower without an exorbitant expense. And even then, it's somewhat marginal, or the heating and cooling solutions in either the West Wing or in the Central and East Towers. So this does bring all that up to date. Higher ceilings, wider hallways, improved ventilation, air conditioning, and so on. Again, it makes for a nicer space. It attracts that high vitality resident, so that we are able to have people who see a building that now meets them where they are in their life, and hopefully that is attractive to them. Significant reduction in maintenance and the capital spending. And we will be sharing with you an FAQ and some building facts when you leave, so you have some things to refer to. The goal is that you all have a home in this new town, and you have a lot of say in where you will live in that new tower. We will do our best to find ways to make it so that new living environment for you is one that you will feel really good about. So we don't by any means want to be leaving you out, but there is the time it takes to build it where there has to be another home. But the goal is that you come back into a place that you really love. And then increased safety and security is a core thing of what we want to do. And I'm particularly sensitive about this for the West Wing because of proximity to some of the elevators that go down into the E level and to Monday Market and right there by Piggott Corridor. And we got to do a better job. And those are things that require a major league redesign. Well, this bakes that in so that we take some of that safety issue off the table. So, just kind of a quick look at the financial improvements you get, on a projected basis from the addition of a new tower is that, you have your cash flow sinks a little bit while you're in the building phase and then jumps a lot when you're in the build-up phase. And it just kind of takes a little while to kind of get back to where you want to be. But if you look at this and see that it takes you 10 or 15 years to kind of get to where you want to be, think about where it is if you start where you don't want to be. You barely get above ground. Starting at a strong place, we lose a little bit of ground because of the expenses we're putting money into now, and then you build back up again. And that's true on the earning side too. When you see these red below the lines where you have a negative earning, that's when you are having the costs associated with relocating residents, coupled with not having the new entrance fees for that west gate. And then you also have the fill up of a new tower that takes time. So here's some basic facts. And again, you're going to have a sheet to walk away with, so you'll be able to kind of think about it and kind of formulate questions for future meetings. It's a 220 feet above sidewalk, 28 total floors, 21 above sidewalk, environmentally advanced, 150 living units, accounting for the 50 people who live here now, with the idea that 100 people would be new people. And we believe in our market, there are 100 people out there, and we're in the process of proving this out, so it's not just an opinion, that there are 100 people that think and behave and want what you have. Elevators, of course, they bagged my idea of just using the stairs to save money, so you can be thankful for that. Parking, of course, amenity spaces, and our timing would be the start of in and around 2024. So we're 2 years out from that, and still other things have to be determined before we get there. And approximate finish time somewhere in mid to latter part of 2007. And this is all speculative at this point. There are many things we need to do in the meantime. But I want to talk a little bit about the people that are involved in this process, and I want to turn it over to Ann and also to Mike Meekum, who's online here, to talk a little bit about the Board of Trustees. This is not Jim and Mike making something up in the over a beer in the bistro. This is a pretty thoughtful exercise that hopefully you have witnessed and believe to be true. We can share more details at another time. But this is about what the Board of Trustees do in this organization and the decisions that they make and have made over time. Ann, can I pass it your way? And then also, Mike, if you're hearing us, you can please chime in following Ann.
Take a deep breath. At least I'm taking a deep breath because this is a lot to digest in one time. But I will tell you that we've been working on it easily 2 years. And we started out, I think Mike has really summarized the process extremely well and accurately. We are none of us insensitive to what this means to the community now, nor are we willing to do the easier thing, which is pick an option that's probably more palatable for current residents, perhaps, and risk not getting to the sustainability that we need. So this is what you pay me the big bucks for, and all the other trustees, is to sit and model this kind of process through, go through the hard work of meetings and learning and exploring options as thoroughly as we possibly can. And I don't think we've left a stone unturned when we were looking at how do we get to the sustainability that we feel we are responsible for making sure we reach. It's our job to keep this thing going. It's our passion to make sure that this option for living at our ages is available in the future. And that's what this has been all about. Having come in with the North Tower boomers in 2007, I was, I guess, a part of the incoming class that was looked upon with considerable unhappiness by residents whose lives were terribly disrupted during the 3 years of construction. The details of which cannot recall precisely since I wasn't here when it all started, but lost amenity rooms for 3 years. The assisted living whole unit had to be moved. People were moved into other facilities for that period of time. And a great sense of fear and loss on the part of people who had lived here, and this was their home. You know, this is where they came to spend this time of their lives in a sense of security and safety and familiarity that all of a sudden got upended. And I'm glad that I came in at that time, and I'm glad that there are people here now, both on staff and among residents, who lived through that time. And what happened was really quite not just miraculous, it was magical in some ways, and that the residents welcomed us. There was a very welcoming feeling to us, even though there were some who let us know that they were feeling like we were interlopers and were going to wreck the place. Because after all, when you increase the population by a third of new people, there's a risk if you're concerned about, is it going to be the same? Is it going to be still more the place that I love and feel as my own, my home? And we live through that. And I guess that gives me a sense of not just possibility, but excitement about what can happen to Horizon House as the place that we love and live in. It also realized that the way in which the resident community rallied around that process to not just cope with the upset of it, but to begin feeling about the possibilities that could come with these changes was really heartening. And I guess that experience gives me a lot of, it's not only optimism, a lot of a sense of just promise about what this is going to mean for Horizon House, for the future of Horizon House, as well as how it's going to strengthen what we have here now. So that's my perspective on this. And I just want to reiterate, it was not easy. It was not easy to get here, but having finally reached this decision and reached the point of view that this is going to be what we need for the sustainability of Horizon House, it feels really very promising and quite wonderful.
Mike Mika, you want to speak?
Sure. Thanks, Mike and everyone. And I'm sorry I can't be there today. I think it's been a wonderful overview and summary of where we've been. Not a lot to add. I would just simply say, we went through an incredibly rigorous and importantly thoughtful process with strategic planning. We really didn't leave anything unturned. For me, I view this as just an incredible opportunity, and an opportunity that we can avail ourselves to from a position of strength today. We're not distressed, right? But, and we're thankful for that. And so, this is a real opportunity to go and, if you will, skate to where the puck's going to be. I mean, we're looking out in the long term. We have some great history with these types of initiatives. As Mike showed with the timeline going back to the genesis of the Horizon House. And I just see it as an incredible opportunity to go out there to do things to preserve and protect that which makes us unique and special, our competitive advantage, this DNA, this resident-driven culture, to enhance our financial sustainability. And yeah, again, I just see this as just a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. And I think we're fortunate to be able to avail ourselves to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So a few more slides here, and then we'll have some question time. And, the expectation isn't that everybody has all their, questions all lined up. This is a lot of information to digest. And then as you're digesting it, then all of a sudden it becomes really personal. And then there's a whole new layer of digestion that really affects, your gut. So there will be time, and that's, again, how we operate here. We will take the time to have the meetings, whether they're groups or they're in person or in whatever format is necessary to help people begin to move forward with where we are. Other people who play, a serious role in this, obviously Methuen. I can tell you that without Methuen, we just wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm sure there are other great architectural firms, but we couldn't have done it with what we had in the past. These folks understand and get, and were able to, in fairly short order, come up with something that they thought could be approved by the city. And again, it's just a sketch at this point. The due diligence is still well underway. We'll talk about that in a minute. Yes, Eric.
Is Bethune the same organization, which we heard from?
Yes, right.
With the other, did not?
Correct. And this also helps because then they are marrying up not only look and feel, but functionality, and also aware of timing. I should say parenthetically that as disruptive as a master planning process is to everyone, because it occurs in so many different locations within the community, the West Wing is less disruptive to non-West Wing people. It's very disruptive to you. I don't want to undersell that at all, but it, because of its isolation, allows for it not to be as profoundly disruptive as it could be if it were like the Central Town. Back. Go back up here. Residents, you are a part of the role and responsibility to doing this right. You're going to have recommendations and ideas. We're not going to ask you to design the building, so don't submit your designs by 5 o'clock today. But you are going to care about how you're treated, how we approach things that make it seem fair and reasonable, even if it's not a choice you would make, independent of what we're asking of you. So we want your involvement. And that's, again, something else that we pride ourselves in, is that, I have lots of hard conversations with residents. The important thing is that we have the hard conversations. That is what the community is about. And we think it leads to a better outcome. So you will be active and involved in the process. The resident professional group, when the North Tower was built, they were not included very much. And it still sticks in the craw of some of those people. Jane Hastings was one in particular who would have liked to have had more involvement and had ideas of how it could be improved for the benefit of people in her age group. Well, let's make sure we're not being stupid about that. So Grant Hildebrand, George Lotchke have already been involved. They're very enthusiastic, as you would expect, because it's architecture, right? This is right down their alley. And Jane, who is in the West Wing, says, yeah, okay, this makes sense. They will be a part of helping make sure that we're building a building that is ultimately suited for the very people who live there. And not just, this isn't, just to be on the magazines. This is to be something that we live and use. Residents Council, we take great pride in having a Residents Council that is very active and aggregates information. And we want to use that group to help us understand where there are tensions that we might not otherwise know, or ideas and opportunities that we might not otherwise know. Finance Committee, of course, this is not cheap. And this is going to be a big deal, and we got to make sure that we've got it all lined up and we're smart about how we do the finance. And Anderson, who is the contractor that Eli works with, who's been doing most of what we have here now, we would expect them to be the contractor going forward. Isn't a guaranteed slam dunk, but that's who we think at this point. And of course, the management team, myself and Eli and others, will be integrally involved to shepherd this process forward. These things don't happen just when you say it happens. They have to be driven, and that is a big part of what my job is. So where are we so far in all of this? Well, we feel clearly that we have identified the sustainability need, that we're not making that up, that we do understand that it's something that needs to be addressed, and that timing now is good so that we catch things while we're here and not when we're here. The building concept outline, as you saw in the pictures, that we have an idea of what it could look like. That doesn't mean we got all the floor plans and configuration, because part of that is a function of getting some input from marketing, getting some input from the marketplace, and others to make sure that we design something that fits with the audience that we intend to serve. We have a preliminary cost, but you can't do too much in costs until you have the detailed drawings. So it's very speculative. And of course, we're in a very high cost environment for building. So who knows how these numbers change. But the three legs of the stool that we continue to lengthen and to tool are the building itself and its design, the building, the preliminary cost or doing the cost. The third one is the market study that says there are people out there that really want it. Initially, we went to the marketplace with a group that is very familiar with doing this type of work. I thought they were top notch, called Promatura. Believe it or not, they're in an obscure town in Missouri. And I wouldn't have thought that a quality organization would be from this little town, but they are. And they did an initial study to say that there's generally the people in your overall economic target range that would fit within this building to be interested. The next step and the more comprehensive thing that gets underway starting next week is a psychographic study. Because we don't just want people who have the resources to live here. Remember, vitality is a function of having the right people live here. The people who value that is a part of what we do. So they are going to be digging deeper to make sure that we have the right people, as well as people who are capable of being a part of this. And again, when we have, your choices of apartments, we're not going to be, imposing new charges on you. So this is when we look at the marketplace for who can afford the entrance fees. That's not your burden. That's the burden of the new people who come in. So the next steps is we continue the discussions with residents, mostly this week, so that by the time we're through this week, everyone will have had the conversation like this or some material to read about it. We are in the process of refining the building design. We will share more of that as we know more. That allows to defining the project cost. That allows, and then also the market study I just referenced. We're going to be doing more detail on that. So there are a lot of check boxes that still have to happen to say this project can really come about. We have to have a relocation plan. What does it mean for people and where do they go? And how do you start getting your head around that? And you can't start so early and make plans and then, you're 2 years out and find out that whatever the plans were doesn't make sense. So we have to think through what's the timing of that? When do we bring this up in real time for residents? So that has to be thought through. We hope that we get to a good final feasibility by the end of this year, that we have said the three legs of the stool, that the building design, the cost of the building, and the market support for new residents to be in that building are strong enough to say, keep going forward. That's our goal. There can be other impediments to why it can't happen, but this is our strategic plan. We're not, knocking a building down and starting construction tomorrow. We're showing you this incremental process that we hope will lead to the building of this building. And of course, detailed planning, and there is, this is, a bullet point of profound depth. So we can't answer everything in this, but we're formulating all the issues that come up, and you will be helping us with some of those things because they're going to be top of your mind, maybe before ours. So our current timeline is 2022 is really about refining those costs in financing and demand. 23 is more detailed planning about what we really mean for residents in the West Wing, but we'll have lots of conversation in advance of that. The 2024 forward is really the demo and construction if everything were to go and that we could get the permits and we had the right building and blah, blah, blah. That's it. That was a lot of information in a relatively short period of time, but I want to stop now. We're done with slides. You can offer your thoughts, opinions, ask your questions. There will be more time at other times to do that too. Yeah.
Where does this put the plan that's in the hallway there?
So,
How does, I mean, you can't put the veranda thing and connect it to the west wing that isn't going to be there.
so the good news is that, again, ideally you don't want to be doing both of these at the same time. Master planning and strategic planning. When strategic planning is about something on your own campus, but we are where we are and need to do that. We have thought about, and so when people said, well, why do you have this veranda going around the perimeter? That doesn't make any sense. Well, because I know something that you didn't know then, that it needs to connect to something. So it is being designed with the idea to connect. So when somebody says, hey, we don't need a performance hall, we're perfectly happy with what we got. Well, I know something that people didn't know, that we have to have a greater capacity. It doesn't need to be where it was proposed to be on B1. It might need to be a part of this new tower, but we do have to create some more capacity to serve a larger audience. So I couldn't share those things at the time because of obvious reasons, but we have been thinking, and this is why, to your point, Eric, was Bethune a part of both deals? Yes, and that makes it so that we're not designing something that doesn't fit together like the right puzzle. Yes, Judy?
How many residents do you anticipate living in this new tower? And can our rest of our facilities sustain them, the dining facilities, the gyms, the other activity rooms?
So, good point. So, yes, you have to increase some capacity. If you recall from the master plan, dining got really big. All of a sudden, we were taking over the executive row, and it was part of dining too, informal, but nonetheless. So again, I knew something that you didn't know, that we had to accommodate greater capacity. There are opportunities to expand that gym area along that wall where the clinic is and move that somewhere else. So there's ways in which we can expand that. We expect to get some more amenity space inside of a new building so that we can accommodate more people. So we have been thinking about an increase in capacity as we have been thinking both master planning and this, because they've both been going together for quite some time.
And how many residents?
Oh, and so the units, there'll be 150 total units.
Which is 100 more than.
So 100 more than what we have in the West Wing now, and that could be as many as 200 if everybody came in as a couple, or 100 if everyone came in single.
One of the things that happens is Monday Market, and that is an incredible part of who we are.
Mhm.
And so where would that be moved to, and where would our cars be moved to if it's all coming down?
Yeah, so these are the kinds of questions, and we Monday Market is come up. We will need to temporarily relocate Monday Market and make sure that it has a place in, and we've already talked about where it could possibly be in a new building. So yes, we've thought about that. Yes, parking is gonna now be a challenge that we'll have to figure out the details. This is the beginning of all the questions. And so when somebody says, my God, haven't they thought about this? No, probably not. Why? Because so much of this is iterative. Again, we'll share a FAQ of the things we can think about that we can answer off the top of our head, but this is why this next year is so important in getting the questions and make sure it's not something that we've overlooked or ignored.
Briefly though, both Bethune and Anderson, they appreciate the importance of Monday Market so much. It has absolutely been part of the conversation when discussing feasibility and the logistics of, where's Bethune, where's Anderson going to set cranes and stuff like that, but also absolutely where on campus can we place Monday Market so that Monday Market stays open during construction. And more importantly, or maybe most noteworthy, is that after this construction, Monday Market will be grander than ever.
Yes.
The Sky Lounge, you're investing a lot in the Sky Lounge, it's going to be torn down. Will the present Sky Lounge be finished before you tear it down?
So the Sky Lounge is a part of the central tower, so it's not a part of the West Wing, right?
Right, but yeah, so the question is,
Go ahead, Eli.
so, right, so the, We're not actually this project that's going on isn't an improvement to the Sky Lounge. It's an improvement to the central tower as a structure. We're ensuring that the new roof that we installed.
Hello, the Sky Tower. Sky Lounge is on top of the.
What's that, Margie?
Yeah, Sky Lounge is on top of the central tower and, right.
Yeah, correct. So the point is that this difficult project that we're working on is just to maintain the building envelope of the central tower. It isn't so much to enhance the Sky Lounge in any way, it's to enhance the structure so that it's not leaking. And between now and, right.
That should be done hopefully when I won't ask you when, sometime later.
June of this year.
Okay. Other questions or comments at this point? Ginny?
It strikes me that 50 units from the West Wing will need to be shifted into the other place when we get moved, right?
Correct.
So then you're losing the income from 50 units during this period, right?
Correct.
That seems
We're not
substantial.
losing the income from 50, we're losing the entrance fees of 50. In other words, if
Other people won't be moving into
that's
those
correct,
places.
that's right.
So-
So yes, you do lose the income associated with those people not moving in. That's correct, and that is a part of the
But
financial
you'll be
model.
losing other income because we'll be paying for those units, not for the West Wing units
Yeah.
when we're there.
Yeah.
So
Correct. There's a net loss of 50 apartments.
Yes,
during that time, so I mean,
Yeah.
that seems like a huge
yeah,
chunk of change.
Yeah.
And then I remember when you expanded supported living, how people got placed into other units to make that happen, right? Anyway, I'm just appreciating how complicated this thing, it's not such a simple. And in terms of money, there's this decline before, that's the red
Yeah.
part you showed.
yeah, and so that's the thing, is that you know, you can't get to second base unless you take your foot off first. There's a consequence of taking your foot off first. It will be a complicated financial deal. So when we look at this, we have to look at what happens when you have the attrition associated with the wind down of the West Wing and the time it takes to ramp back up. That's why you have a period where things are less than ideal in order to have a future that is considerably brighter. Otherwise, you would just do this way we do this.
And you hope that this is short.
Right, well, of course. I mean, that's the whole idea.
Do you have evidence that when you opened the North Tower that you brought in a lot of leadership and energy for committees?
We got Ann.
Yeah.
No, that, I thought that right away.
Wasn't that enough?
Yeah. Done and done.
She's spectacular, I agree. But I'm just saying, you're making this assertion that by building this, it would re-energize the community, and I wonder if you have evidence that happened.
Well, I would say that. Good, I'll have somebody else say it.
If you look at the people who chaired this council since 2007, I think you'll find that quite a few of them have come from the North Tower. If you look at the chairmanships of the committees, the new committees, there's been a lot of participation. Isn't to say that's the only place it comes from, but there was quite a lot that happened as a result of having that new energy, because people are so excited. I don't know how it was when you guys got here, but when I got here, I thought, wow, there's so much going on around here. And there's this tendency to sign up for every committee that you feel an interest in. And there's just a kind of an initial opportunity to become acquainted and get involved. COVID has changed so much about the way people are integrated into the community and what opportunities they participate as much. But there really was a huge influx at that time. And I suppose, you know, if you like, I can go back and put some numbers on it.
You know, Ginny, it's not a guarantee. You know, we have to hypothesize certain things and do our best thinking. One of the reasons we're doing the psychodemographic study of the marketplace is to ensure that we are able to ask enough people who understand who we are and what we're about to know that they are people who would want to live here and would want to participate, so that we take some of that off the table. Usually when you do a market study in a new building, you're interested in incomes, and that's pretty much it. But we are interested in in continuing to evolve the vitality. So we need to go deeper. So the bulk of our study, it will take 3 months to do this because we'll be doing focus groups. Are there more Margaret Rothschilds, Eric Rothschilds, Ginny Stimsons, Nancy Olsons, whatever, who say, yeah, I want to be a part of that. And I will be accretive to the culture, not a bystander to the culture.
And one of the things that I really appreciate about North Tower residents is that in general that they are kind of higher income residents who could live at Mirabella or Skyline or someplace that is more luxurious, but they're choosing to live in a community that is socioeconomically diverse. And to me, that speaks of a spirit of participation and and appreciating what a community should feel like instead of some monoculture place. So.
Yes, Eric.
Well, I just want to compliment the board and all of the people here who are involved with this idea. I don't know whether just what the right word for it is, whether it's an idea or a project or whatever. But living in the West Wing for as long as we have, there are obvious deficiencies, and they cannot be solved in the present building. And this is visionary. It's really big, and we've just gotten hit with it, as we all have. So we have to talk it all over. But there's an awful lot of new building for older people going up at the present time. And I can only think of Sarah McVeigh, who talked about the competition in the future for people like ourselves. And this would certainly be an antidote to the most depressing of those thoughts.
Agreed. Yes, Carol?
I say here. I mean, I think I have I'm mulling a lot over in my mind, and I think it is absolutely a splendid idea. I'm excited to be a part of the process, definitely. But for Horizon House in our future, I just think it's here for, again, as Eric said, for the board and everyone who's participated and has that much vision. We're a good place to be.
All right, good. Well, there will be lots more time. I'm not going to say I'd love it if you didn't share all this information too quickly with people who haven't had the benefit of the full presentation. That's just be a good courtesy. It's helpful for have everybody hear it kind of as you've heard it, rather than the snippets otherwise. But that's why we're having as many meetings in each day throughout this entire week, so that we're able to reach everybody and get everybody on the same page, so that there isn't a reinvention of the narrative that is inaccurate. So thank you for those who are participating online. Thank you for all being here. This is the very beginning of a lot of conversation, and appreciate very much your involvement and your continued involvement. So thank you, and we're on to more meetings.